What's up, movie lovers? I'm Mike, and this is Gotta Love Them Movies. Oh, you guys, welcome back to another edition of Gotta Love Them Movies, your daily dose of movie news. I'm your host, Mr. Mike Brown. I'm here all the time, and this is our second go-round. If anybody was watching earlier, apparently we're having some audio issues. So if anybody out there in movie land or Facebook land or wherever you happen to be watching this right now, give me a thumbs up or just let me know in the comment section. Is the audio working? Can you hear what it is? Can you hear the words coming out of my mouth? In the words of Chris Tucker from Rush Hour. Is the audio working? Oh, I can hear myself, I think, through Chris's audio. So it sounds like things are working. And speaking of Chris, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mr. Chris Booth. Woo, 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 woo. Chris, thank you so much for being back on the show. You are a man of many talents. You're a comic book writer. You're an illustrator. You're a comedian. You're a producer. I believe you've done podcasting in the past. Like, you have your poker in many, many fires. So thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This is your second. The last time you were on the show was on my birthday. And yeah, you just bring a lot of fun and elements.
Not only was I here on your birthday, but I predicted Wonder Woman would be coming to HBO Max.
You totally did. Yes, you did. You messaged me last night and you said I was right about Wonder Woman. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Then, because my memory only lasts like so far, and then when someone reminds me, oh yeah, I totally remember what's going on. But yes, remind our viewers of the situation.
We were talking about what was going to happen with Wonder Woman 1984, whether they were going to release it in theaters at Christmas or push it back, and I said that I felt like they should release it on HBO Max, maybe simultaneously release it. And yeah, and that's the choice they made.
And they went with it. It's also interesting to note that it's still coming out in theaters, but it's primarily, going to be released in HBO Max. And of course, like internationally, it's having early releases. I think in the UK it's coming out 2 weeks early. I know in China it's coming out 2 weeks early, so it definitely is, they're doing a big push for theatrical release, but at the same time, like it's primarily in the United States. I think the majority of people are going to stay at home, sign up for HBO Max and do all that. So, but yes, Chris, you were right. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what was going to go on. But then again, I mean, this just continues to prove the point. Things that were impossible yesterday suddenly are possible today. Things that you never in a million years thought would happen. But hey, this is the world we live in. And ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already done so, head over to YouTube and type in Gotta Love Them Movies. You'll see a little red box in the top right-hand corner that says subscribe. Go ahead and click that button. What clicking that button does is it helps us to widen our subscriber base. And yes, I understand that you're watching this on Facebook Live right now. You may be watching the playback on YouTube, but the live show is broadcast on Facebook. So it begs the question, why go to YouTube and click the subscribe button? Well, here's the thing. With the more subscribers we get, the more watched content the channel gets. And with the more watched content the channel gets, the more available and qualifiable I become to start earning ad revenue. And I get to make this show my full-time job. So I very much appreciate your help and support in that regard. And of course, as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers, this show will be moving from Facebook to YouTube. So just keep that on your radar there. All right, guys, with all that down out of the way, now it's time to take a little bit of movie news.
What?
All right, you guys, let's jump right into it. In our first bit of movie news, you may have heard of a little movie called Clifford, the Big Red Dog. Well, now an entire year in advance, the producers of the film have decided, hey, let's go ahead and give a first look at Clifford, the Big Red Dog. Early this morning, they released like a 20-second trailer, just essentially an announcement trailer. We knew this movie was coming. This movie had been talked about and, written about for a few months, if not like a year. So we know that Clifford, the Big Red Dog the major motion picture was happening. It was coming. But now we have our first official look at what Clifford the Big Red Dog is going to look like. And, Chris, it looks like a big red dog.
I'm riveted.
Oh, man.
I mean, when they rewrite the AFI Top 100 list, this is going to be up there. It's going to be up there with Citizen Kane, Schindler's List.
Yes, but that just might happen. Who knows? We haven't seen anything from the movie yet. It could be.
Sure.
Could be.
Sure.
Dark Knight Returns. I'm thinking of the animated, the comic, which is superior than The Dark Knight Rises. I need to concede that. But yeah, who knows? The Dark Knight, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Jim Carrey's The Cable Guy. I mean, who knows? Who knows? Anything could happen.
Anything can happen, Mike. We live in a world where anything can happen.
Chris, did you see the announcement trailer this morning? It's only 20 seconds long.
I did not.
Well,
No.
I mean, you can see.
Mike, I've got better things to do in my life than to watch 20 seconds worth of Clifford the Big Red Dog.
Like what? I'm sorry. I was under the assumption that you enjoyed Clifford the Big Red Dog, just the same as the rest of us.
I do enjoy Clifford the Big Red Dog. My issue with just what I've seen of it so far was how literal they took the concept of it being a big red dog. Look, I'm not one of these people that gets into like hating on movies, but it's rather obvious. I don't know, when I was a kid and I read those books, it's rather obvious that he is not like the people of the world of the book do not perceive him as a fire engine red dog.
Right.
That is just the way it was colored. So yeah, this is pretty insane.
It's very literal.
Look, maybe it's going to be great, because ultimately, when I look back on some of the movies as an adult, I can say they are not good films. In fact, sometimes they're terrible films, but I loved them as a kid. Could not get enough of them. And if this is a film that gets a kid into like film, or gets them into reading, or gets them, brings some joy to their life, go for it. Go for it.
I could not agree more. And especially with your sentiments about like, if this is the kind of movie that gets a kid like inspired into film and, storytelling, kind of like all the stuff that you and I have been a part of for so long now, I think that is the win. That's the goal, I also look at this and I think of movies like Paddington, or even the Peter Rabbit series now that's, starting to come out. Those Paddington movies are incredible. Like, they're really, really good. Not just from like a children's storytelling perspective, but like those are really good movies. Is it probable that Clifford the Big Red Dog is going to be a fantastic family story with heart and whatever? Maybe, but also maybe not. Like, who knows?
I'm willing to bet it will be better than the Martin Short film Clifford.
Oh man, that was like a similar take on Arthur, wasn't it? Like a fish out of water kind of story. I remember slivers. I don't remember too much of this film.
Martin Short, in the film Clifford, Martin Short as a 40-year-old man plays a 10-year-old boy. And it's not a film in which everyone views him. There's no... The movie was written almost like a Uncle Buck-esque, like precocious kid film, with Charles Grodin playing his soon-to-be adoptive father. So they wrote this film of this like precocious kid, and then they just cast Martin Short as the kid. It is absurd.
Okay, coming back to the Big Red Dog.
Hey, gotta love them movies.
Hey, all of them. We're all inclusive here. Here's a question that that just popped into my brain. Why release this announcement trailer a year in advance? Because this isn't slated to come out until next November, a year from now. What good does releasing a 20-second trailer, an announcement trailer of just saying, hey, A, Clifford the Big Red Dog is coming, and B, this is what he looks like? Because I will admit, like, if we're going to be nitpicky about this, the color of the live action dog like the tone of red is not the same color red. It's a different shade of red than what they use in the books. In the books, they stay very true to the candy apple fire engine red that we've all known Clifford the Big Red Dog to be. This is a little bit more of like a burgundy. It's a little bit more of like, it's not quite magenta, but it has a softer feel to it, right? So, being that these announcements have just come out, like, okay, and
Well, if you
who
think
cares?
about it, Mike, I mean, this is almost like what they did with Sonic, the Hedgehog. You know, this is a studio's way of doing really cheap market research. So if this clip comes out and they get this insane response from the internet, oh my God, the dog's color is off. Oh my God, what are they doing? They now have a year to fix it. If they get a super positive response, great. They have a year to build off that super positive response. If they get no response, which I actually think is more likely, then they know exactly what they have to do to get the response that they want. So a lot of times I think that these trailers are quote, leaked or released so early because it's cheap market research. It gives them it allows them to take a temperature of the audience. And it has become, you know, sort of the thing that we do now in the industry, is that we release these videos or these sneak peeks very, very early. And then the final thing I'll say is, like, in a world in which you have what I've not done any research on this, but there's at least 5 to 6 viable streaming services. There is video on demand, film on demand, YouTube. I mean, there's just so many ways for people to take in content now that you have to somehow cut through the noise. And this is a way to do it, is release it early, get people talking about it, and then just keep reminding them. Because I think the marketing concept is someone has to hear something or see something 7 times before it sticks in their head.
That's a fair point. I think those are all great points, things that I wouldn't have initially thought of. But yeah, I mean, it's.
You're welcome.
I think I heard some. I mean, like, who knows the validity of this? But it's always one of those things that you're told when you're little. You have to do something with like 21 days in a row before it becomes habit. And I think, the same thing. But what you said is true. Like, you need to hear or see something 6 or 7 times before it starts sticking in your brain. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Question is for you guys: what do you think of the 20-second announcement trailer of Clifford the Big Red Dog? What do you think of the design? Do you think it needs to be live action? Should they go maybe 2D animation, kind of in the way of Tom and Jerry, the way the Tom and Jerry trailer made it look? It could go either way. Jump on down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts.
Well, Mike, I will say this before we move on. The only thing about this movie that I find slightly troubling, and I don't know that this was what their thoughts were, so I have no insight into this. But what I will say is, you pose an interesting question about why it's not just a 2D film or even like a 3D animated film. I feel like sometimes people within the entertainment industry and fans feel like if something is not a flesh and blood movie, it somehow delegitimizes the validity of their love of the thing. Meaning, for years, growing up as a comic book fan, for years comic book fans were just dying for to be comic book movies, and you would hear this idea of, like, it legitimizes this thing that I love. It legitimizes this comic, this thing that I'm a fan of. And the thing is like, the language of film is so different from the language of a comic book or the language of a cartoon or a 3D animated film,
Sure.
or even a children's book. And so it feels like sometimes that these things are being made. Yeah, I mean, there is a calculation of, like, we want to make money, and Clifford the Big Red Dog is a known entity,
Sure.
and they can, do a lot of market research on how well the books sell, etc. I think there was a cartoon at one point. So they can do all that market research. But there's also, I feel like, especially within fandom, this idea that unless it's a live action movie, it doesn't count. And that to me is really sad. It's really sad that people feel like the thing that they love has to be workable across mediums, or it's just not legitimate. I think it's totally okay to like something that's just a book.
Well, we see examples of that all the time throughout pop culture, right? And you know, as you pointed out, within specifically comic book culture, I mean, Star Wars fandom is one of the greatest things in the world, and also B, one of the most toxic things in the world. Again, regarding fandom, because we take things to the nth degree. And while yes, I love living in the world of the Avengers movies, and you know, Captain America and Iron Man and Captain Marvel and Black Panther, like all the rest of them. It's such a wonderful entity, and the way that they've brought these characters to life and stories to life is magnificent. Say what you will about the films themselves, but it is such an incredible feat to be able to make this happen. And yeah, you're right. I mean, a lot of people do have this idea that unless it comes to the big screen, like, because I will admit, you know, you and I were talking just before the show started that I'm a huge Ninja Turtles fan. Everybody knows this. You know this. You just revealed to me that your wife is a huge Ninja Turtles fan as well. When I was, I must have been what, like 7 or 8 when the 1990 film came out. It for me, it did legitimize like my love of this fan, and not just the movie. Do you remember the tour? Shortly after the second movie came out, they announced this Ninja Turtles tour. It was a musical tour, where
coming out of their shells,
man. Oh, I loved it. I loved it so much. I got the soundtrack. I did everything that I could to like get my hands on a copy of the video cassette. It was so magical to me. And what was interesting about that is that I had this intense love and passion that nobody at my school had the same amount of passion for Ninja Turtles. But when I watched that video cassette, I could see other children just like me, my same age, in Radio City Music Hall, and they were all jam-packed in this concert hall just to watch Ninja Turtles up on stage. And to this day, it rests as one of the worst Ninja Turtles entity or property or thing that they've ever done with the Turtles. But it did, to me, as a child, kind of legitimize, to your point, I feel special. I feel like I'm not alone in this thing. And maybe there is some amount of legitimacy from a child's perspective to say that, like, I may love this thing, and if other people love this thing, like, it makes it even better. It makes it more special. That's why we go to Comic-Con. That's why we go to, you know, all these different conventions and cosplay and, you know, online forums. And for heaven's sakes, this show, you know, we come together to kind of celebrate these things that we love. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't know.
Well, like I said, I don't know that there's anything wrong with it. I just think it's like, I find it slightly sad that people feel like that has to be done that way.
Yeah.
You know, one of the things that I find so toxic about Star Wars fandom, and, you know, I preface this by saying I worked for a number of years in college running comic book stores, so I saw this firsthand working comic book stores. But it's like Star Wars fans always have this need, this deep-seated need for Star Wars to be the coolest thing in the room. And they get really violently upset. Not violently, that's me being hyperbolic. They get really upset if Star Wars is somehow perceived as not cool or not the greatest thing ever. And it's like just what you said about Turtles. When you're a fan of something, there's a lot of dumb stuff. I'm a fan of Star Trek. There's a lot of dumb Star Trek. There's a lot of Star Trek that is unwatchable. And in that, it is fun. I am a Star Wars fan. I love all the Star Wars movies. Are there better Star Wars movies than others? Yes. But to me, if it's a Star Wars movie, it's better than not a Star Wars movie. And when I say I love all Star Wars, I even love the Ewoks films. And those are terrible
You're talking
movies.
about like the Battle for Endor and Courage, Caravan of Courage, yeah. Holiday,
and they're
Star Wars
dumb.
holiday special.
That Star Wars holiday special, it is dumb. Solo is a dumb movie. But it's a great movie. It's great fun to watch. And that's the part to me that's like so like frustrating about that particular world of fandom is that they seem to not be capable of embracing the inherent dumbness of the thing that they're watching.
It's true. Yeah.
Um, it's like the original Star Wars movie is a very good movie. It also has an extended scene of people wearing knockoff Halloween costumes in a bar.
Well, I talk about this all the time, in that, like, just because you love something doesn't mean that it's good. You can love
Right.
really like, very famously, I see this all the time. The Love Guru with Mike Myers, the one film that kind of singularly ended his career. I mean, he's still working, he still does like little bits here and there, but that movie broke him. The audience response to The Love Guru hurt him so much emotionally that he just kind of stopped doing comedy in the general foray that he typically has been doing comedy in, like, comedic films. I love that movie unapologetically. It's so stupid.
You're wrong. You're wrong about that.
It's so dumb. It's even borderline cultural appropriativeness. It's
Well, there's nothing borderline about that, but yeah.
I will argue the borderline. I will argue the borderline argument. But all that aside,
Well, what I would say is this, Mike. It is 100% cultural appropriation. The thing is like we enter that debate by saying cultural appropriation is inherently bad. There's nothing inherently bad about cultural appropriation. All cultures all cultures take from other cultures. It happens. It just so happens that the culture of the United States is built on the back of appropriating other cultures. So it's not inherently bad to appropriate a culture for some other purpose. I guess the question that you're asking is it borderline distasteful in the way it appropriates the culture?
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
I will borderline argue the distastefulness of how he goes about doing it. But yeah, I mean, just because I enjoy that movie doesn't mean it's a good movie.
There's a lot of bad movies I love. I absolutely adore Sleepaway Camp.
Oh,
and
that is a
terrible.
That is a fun movie. That is an unapologetically fun movie. Anyway, we've got to move on. We got to move on. Questions for you guys. Clifford the Big Red Dog. Looking forward to it? Not looking forward to it? What do you think? It's interesting to me how this 20-second trailer spawned such an in-depth conversation, right? Because we really got deep on this. Anyway, guys, jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right.
This is what they wanted.
Ooh. Hello, internet trolls. Are you speaking right now? Our next bit of movie news is Bill and Ted 3. Apparently, there was news that dropped from one of the writers, Ed Solomon, and he kind of went on to explain why one of the key moments in the film had to get cut from production. Essentially, like, and I'll let you guys kind of go through this particular article is on Collider, so if you want to check that out, head over to Collider and look up the Ed Solomon explains why this key scene was cut from the Bill and Ted 3 script. But I find it really interesting. Any insight as to filmmaking or cinematography or anything along those lines, I find fascinating. So when one of the original scriptwriters of the film explains and gives detailed explanation as to why this one particular scene had to get cut from the movie, and not just cut from the movie, they couldn't even film it. They didn't have the money to film the scene, and he had to choose between one scene or another. Chris, first of all, did you have a chance to see Bill and Ted Face the Music? Second of all, what did you think of it? And third, have you had a chance to read the script pages that Ed Solomon put out into the internet world today?
The answers are no, I don't know, and no. I'm sorry. I did not do my homework.
That was wonderful.
I love Bill and Ted. I love the first movie. I have not seen the second film since I was a kid. And I have no overwhelming desire to watch the third film. I heard it's very good, but there's nothing in me that's like I've got to watch the third film. Um, I'm not one of those people that necessarily feels like everything needs to be a sequel.
I feel
I
that.
don't really, I don't know that there's much story left of mine
In this
from
in
those
this
two characters.
particular film, they had a really great idea.
Sure,
Just
I look forward to seeing it.
you do look forward to seeing it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I look forward to seeing it. I just I have no like overwhelming desire I have in this moment
That's fair.
to watch it. But when I do watch it, I'm gonna enjoy it and I'm gonna have fun with it. Obviously, I just feel like a bad nerd. I feel like I haven't done my nerd homework.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing about living in the world that we currently live in with Netflix and Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus and Amazon and like however many other streaming services that we have. There is so much content that we can't consume it all. We just don't have the capacity to consume all of this stuff, you know? And I just listed off a few different streaming services, not even taking into consideration like all the big major motion pictures that are out there either. So there's a
Well,
lot.
what is the scene that got cut?
So the scene that got cut, here, let's go through. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Ed Solomon did post four of the, whatchamacallits, script pages. All right, so we're heading over to Twitter, right onto Ed Solomon's page, and he just kind of goes through the idea of the movie is that, because Bill and Ted have yet to write the song that is going to save the universe, that is going to bring everything into harmony and whatever. And so now they only have like, was it like 7 hours or 17 hours, something like that. They have a very short, finite amount of time to write the song that will bring all of the worlds all together, right? And so they have this idea of like, hey, if we go to the future, we will have already written it, so let's go ahead and steal it from ourselves. And so Bill and Ted go on this adventure to like, they go to the future, they go to the past, they go back to the future, they go back to the past, and they're confronting other versions of themselves trying to steal the song that is going to bring the world together, right? So that's the idea, that's the concept of the movie. In this one particular scene that got cut, they go back to their teenage selves. I think they're like 10 years old, something like that. Their 14-year-old babysitter, Missy, is, babysitting them, whatever. They're just jumping around on their bed, playing their air guitars, whatever. And so, of course, the older Bill and Ted burst in through the window. Hey, we're you. You're us. You have no idea what's going on. And just saying like, hey, you need to start writing this, the song immediately. Start writing it now because it's super important. And of course, they freak the younger version of themselves out so much, and it's weird, and it's silly, but it also plays into all of those same kind of tropes that we've known Bill and Ted do over the years of like, oh, Missy's so hot, dude, she's my babysitter, and all that. So that's just a brief general synopsis as to what got cut. It was an interesting scene because towards the end, it got, while yes, it was weird and wacky, it also had some heart to it, which is like, oh, they get to confront their younger selves and then now as adults learn things about who they are, having just visited their super younger selves, right?
Yeah, I mean that. What I will say that I find interesting about the premise of the film, and the reason I said I I don't have I don't have this need to watch it, but I look forward to watching it. The reason I say that is that I don't really have a great affinity for those characters. We're about to talk about a story after this that I have a much deeper affinity for. Um, I like the characters, but it's not something that I return to again and again as a kid. Um, but I'm interested and I want to see it because I do find the concept of their potential wasted and how do you come to grips with that very interesting. I mean, you and I, Mike, are close to the same age, and there is that thing you get to when you get to be about our age where you go, wow, did I waste all that time? And I think a lot of it is because it's so ingrained in us as kids that we have to have a happy ending, whatever that means. That if the ending or that our current life as we know it isn't the most perfect happy way it could possibly be, then it makes us question, well, did I make a bunch of mistakes? And so that meta commentary in a goofy comedy to me is very intriguing, and it reminds me a lot of BoJack Horseman. So I'm looking forward to seeing the film for that reason.
I mean,
I just haven't gotten.
It is a silly, goofy movie. I mean, it is a Bill and Ted movie. I personally think that it's the weakest of the three films. It also ends the way the film culminates, and I'm not going to give away like any spoilers or any big secrets from the movie, but the movie ends in a way that I feel is disingenuous to everything that they've been building up in the previous two films. And when you see it, you'll understand what I'm talking about. It's not a bad ending. I actually really like the ending, but I do feel it is disingenuous to what is already. It kind of goes along with the concept of yes and, right? I don't feel that they yes anded the first two films, but whatever.
Sure.
It's a fun movie.
It's the reason why Rise of Skywalker is a wacky film to watch, because on its own, it's like there's a lot of interesting things that happen, but it's so divorced from the previous two films, especially from the second film of that trilogy, that it just feels out of place.
Oh, man. There's so much about that movie. But anyway, Rise of Skywalker.
That'll be your next show we'll work on, called "Gotta Love Star Wars?" ?
Lean into the brand, and the entire show is just going to be Star Wars. You know what? Maybe we'll do that. Maybe like we'll go away. We'll all prepare some notes. You prepare some notes. We'll just do an entire Star Wars. We'll break down the entire Skywalker saga.
I'm 100% down with that. We go through all the films, breakdowns, talk about it. What we liked, what we didn't
be like
like.
A 2-hour.
I am 100%.
We'll have to do like a watch party, just you and me privately.
Sure, it could be a mini-series. And that if we try to incorporate the Star Wars TV shows, it will be a very long mini-series.
We'll get there. Hey, we're not on a time constraint right now. Anyway, guys, question is for you. Have you seen Bill and Ted 3, Bill and Ted Face the Music? Would you have liked to have seen the scene incorporated into the film, or are you kind of happy the way that it is? I would be very interested. Jump on down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, we have two more bits of news before we take your live questions. Then our next bit of movie news is more of television news. Mr. Dave Chappelle. Mr. Dave Chappelle has, or rather, Chappelle Show, his very, very famous television show he did for Comedy Central, has now disappeared on Netflix. Where did it go, you ask? Well, as this article here in Collider points out, and it's not just Collider, I think it was the Hollywood Reporter that broke the story. Dave Chappelle, and in fact, when I say Hollywood Reporter broke the story, it was actually Dave Chappelle himself posting an 18-minute-long video on Twitter that Hollywood Reporter then took and ran with. Dave Chappelle explained this whole situation, how CBS Viacom, they had sold the show, Chappelle Show, to Netflix, and so Netflix, now paying a licensing fee, gets to show Chappelle Show. It's so bizarre saying Chappelle Show. They were now able to air the Chappelle Show on Netflix, obviously for a licensing fee from CBS Viacom. Well, when wind of this got to Dave Chappelle, he was like, hang on a second. What? This is my show. I created the show. And I he understands, he signed contracts. He doesn't own Chappelle Show anymore. He created it. He stars in it. It is his cumulative life work up until that stage in his life. And he understands. He realizes, he signed contracts. He doesn't own the show anymore. Legally, there's not a lot of ground that he has to stand on. However, Dave Chappelle was very much of the opinion, he was like, whoa, this is my show. I'm not getting paid for Netflix showing my show on their streaming platform. This just doesn't feel right. This just doesn't seem right. So he approached the people from Netflix, and they had many, many, many conversations about it. And at the end of the day, Netflix was like, you know what? We're going to side with Dave Chappelle on this, and we're going to pull Chappelle's show from our streaming platform. And then Dave Chappelle, actually, I want to jump down to his quote. He had to say this about it. Oh, I just lost it. If you're streaming that show, stolen goods, blah, 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 blah. Okay, here we go. Dave Chappelle says, that's why I work with Netflix. They pay me my money. They do what they say they are going to do, and then they went above and beyond what you could expect from a businessman. Let me read that again. He says, quote, that's why I work with Netflix, because they pay me my money. They do what they say they're going to do, and then they went above and beyond what you could expect from a businessman. I think that is a really interesting perspective, and I think that's why this is such an interesting story, is because you don't see stuff like this happen in the world of contracts and negotiations and bylaws and blah blah blah, all this stuff. Like a one single entity going up to an entire business organization and saying, I think that you wronged me. I feel wrong in this way. And then they did what they felt they needed to do to make things right with Dave Chappelle. Chris, I have mixed feelings about this. I do. I have mixed feelings about this. Dave Chappelle totally got screwed by Comedy Central back in 2005. Public knowledge, everybody knows what's going on, or they know why he left the show. They know why he moved to Africa for a few years, and it's very public knowledge. And I understand that he's also signed contracts. I don't know. I feel I'm of two minds about this. I can understand why CBS and Viacom would make a negotiation deal with Netflix. But I also understand things from Dave Chappelle's perspective and saying, like, this is his baby. This was everything that he had cumulatively built up to at that point in his life. This is his thing. This is one of the major things that he's known for and beloved for. And he's not getting his due diligence. How do you see this? Is there a third perspective, or am I giving both sides of the argument maybe a little too much credence here?
Well, one, I don't think he got screwed by anyone. He got paid a lot of money to do that show.
He left, though. He left. Like he got paid a lot of money, and then he left.
Yeah, and that's his right. And what I would say in it is it makes a lot of sense, because there is a world, just having worked for, I had a couple of interactions with Comedy Central as both an actor and as a writer. So I didn't get too far in these conversations, but got far enough. And in the limited amount of TV work I've done, I know just enough about these contracts to know that there is probably a world in which Netflix had no idea what Chappelle's contract with CBS Viacom was. So it could be that when they purchased the rights to stream Chappelle's show, that they were under the impression that he was going to be getting X amount of money for that. And it could be that he was never given that amount of money. It comes out. So I want to bring up something that you brought up the last time I was on the show, because it's going to put into context what I'm talking about. When we were talking about this whole thing with Wonder Woman, to go back to Wonder Woman, the reason why I think they chose to go the route of putting it on film, putting it in movie theaters, and putting it in streaming is actually, if my understanding of these contracts is correct, and it could be flawed, but if it's correct, while it seems like on paper, oh, that's a really good idea, it's actually what it's doing is it's screwing the writers, and it's screwing the people who made the film. Because a lot of times these writers have built within their contracts that they make a certain amount of money based on how many ticket sales are made in a film, or like in a movie theater. That does not carry, they do not make the same cut if it goes streaming. So a lot of times what will happen is a feature film writer will, and this is all very like, it's all relative. They will actually accept a little less money to write a feature film over something like a streaming TV show because they know they're going to make a certain amount of money on the back end of the film's
Right.
release. If it breaks a certain amount of money, they make more money, and they're more likely to make that money on a feature film being released. Whereas they will accept more money to write like a Netflix show because they know that once they sign away those rights, that's it. They're not going to get any more money. So as an actor, and I don't know if you ever signed one of these contracts, it's a buyout where you do for instance, you do a commercial and they buy out your participation in that commercial for 2 years, meaning for the next 2 years, they can show that commercial as much as they want. You get no residuals off of it.
I have signed.
And then if they
I
want
have signed contracts like that. Yes.
Right. And then if they want to buy it out for another 2 years, they have to buy you out for another 2 years. So it could very well be that based on either some sort of legal settlement that Chappelle made when he walked away from a show, or based on the original contracts they signed, because at the time there was no streaming to speak of, it could be that he's not getting any money at all for it going to Netflix, neither as a producer, writer, or director. And Netflix was not aware of that. And the thing that the article doesn't really go into detail on is that he had a pre-existing contractual relationship with Netflix, meaning they were producing and distributing his stand-up specials, which were making gangbusters money for
Huge.
Netflix. He was making a lot of money off of it. And all he had to do was turn around to Netflix and say, if you don't take this off, you don't get any more stand-up specials from me.
That's a fair point. That's a fair point. It's when you put it like that, it seems a little muscly.
Yeah, it does, but you have to remember, Mike, these companies do not care. And they're going to make as much money as humanly possible off of you, the individual, as they possibly can. That's the reason why I don't really like if an NFL player wants to try to negotiate a contract where they're making $50-60 million a year, go for it, because that team owner is going to make triple that. They're going to make triple that. And that team owner never has to worry about dealing with the physical effects of that of playing football ever. They don't have to deal with that. And the same thing goes with film stars and writers and stuff like this. If Chappelle's show is a hit, the person who's going to make the most off of it, Dave Chappelle did make a lot off of it, but the people that stand to make the most are the studios. The reason why is because if Chappelle's show is a failure, they still get to be a studio and they still get to be in business. Chappelle now no longer has a career. So in the long term, the studio is going to come out. It's sort of like the studio on some level is like a casino. You play long enough, they're going to win. And so I'm not saying that that's what Chappelle did. I'm not saying that Chappelle muscled Netflix out of showing his show. What I'm saying is Netflix was very aware of their relationship with Chappelle. So they were very aware that he, on some level, had a little bit more of the chips in his corner to make this work for him. And also the thing is like, if you think about it, it's kind of smart on his end, because I think Hulu is also showing this. And if he can get Hulu to stop running it as well, that gives him leverage to go back and renegotiate his contract with CBS Viacom.
That's a great point. I mean, those are a lot of great points, and a lot of things that I just never. First of all, I never have been exposed to things in that regard. I mean, I'm a low-level humdrum little comedian trying to make it in this crazy world, right? But I've never actually been in those kinds of situations where I have these multiple-page contracts that I have. I found a few commercials for like web commercials and whatever. Like that was the buyout. Oh, great! You're gonna run this commercial for 2 years on the internet, and I got full disclosure. I got paid $2,000, and I was like, hey, awesome! This is at the time. I'm like, this is wonderful. Yeah, it only ran for 2 years, and guess what? You can't find that commercial online anymore. They took it down. Okay, great, fine, awesome. But when you get into these multiple page contracts that get so intricate and so detailed, like A, that's the stuff that I'm just not familiar with how they work. And also B, you raise some great points, especially about like these mammoth companies like CBS Viacom. If Chappelle's show never airs anywhere else again, okay, fine. They're not gonna go under because of that. But Dave Chappelle, they've made their money off the show. Same thing with Netflix. Oh, we're not going to show this anymore? Okay, great. Guess what? We still have Stranger Things. We have blah, blah, blah. We have this. We've got all these other things coming up, right? They're not going to be hurting for it. But if Dave Chappelle doesn't get paid the money that he is maybe due, then yeah, he will go away. He will become irrelevant without that constant, like what you were saying before, of like having those constant reminders in social consciousness. You have to hear about things over and over and over again.
Well, and the thing is, what the broader context, and not to derail this conversation too much, but the broader context of all this is to kind of take it back to something that I know a lot about, which is comic books. I think, and I'm not going to get these figures right, but I think that Simon and Schuster, when they invented Superman, I think DC only paid them $1,500 altogether, and then they sold their rights.
Well, it wasn't just
Superman. And then they.
It wasn't just the creators of Superman. Like, this is an industry standard, or has been an industry standard for a long time. Marvel stole that business model. The creator of Deadpool, Rob Liefeld. He doesn't own Deadpool. Like, he feels like he should, but he doesn't own Deadpool. And the same thing for like however many people have created. How many mutants exist in the X-Men universe? Hundreds, if not thousands. So many. And a lot of those, like Cannonball, was a low-level character, and now he's starting to emerge as like a main A-lister. And when Cannonball, when he goes off to get his own separate title, creator of Cannonball is not going to earn any residual from that because they don't own the content.
Right, and it's one of these things that, is a lot of times fans will get upset because like a character that they loved from a TV show, so for instance, I'm going to jump genres here. You look at a show like DS9, right? When they developed DS9, they originally developed the idea of the Kira character being Ensign Ro from TNG. And Forbes, who played Ro, had no interest in being on the show. So the first question that you ask yourself is, well, why don't they just recast? Because Ensign Ro was such a known character, and the character of Kira Nerys is so specifically Ensign Ro. Well, why didn't they just use the character and recast the actor? Well, because if they did that, then they would owe the writer and the creator of Ensign Ro money. And CBS did not want to pay them money. So they just create a new character. And that happens all the time on TV. Is that these companies make millions and billions of dollars off the backs of creators who they treat as disposable. And they will do everything in their power to cut these people out of profit sharing. And that's, so for me, I'm like, more power to Dave Chappelle. If he's in a position to be able to do that, more power.
Yeah, you won me over. You won me over. I was on the fence. As I said, when we started this particular segment, I was on the fence. I feel like I felt like I was of two minds. But yeah, now hearing the arguments, yeah, I'm.
Well, just one last little thing to think about this. How every time you and I in the comedy community of New York, every once in a while something will come out on SNL, and then someone will jump in and say, SNL stole that idea from me.
I've heard that multiple times.
If you really look, I'm not saying this happens every time, but if you look into it, there is a good chance that 60 to 70% of the time what has happened is that writer of that original idea put that idea in a packet that they gave to SNL to try to get on SNL. The contract you sign when you send in your packet to SNL, they own that content.
Interesting.
So regardless if they hire you or not, they own that
Interesting.
content.
I did not know.
And so they could very well go, oh, that's a really funny idea. Let's rework it and work it into a sketch. So that's the thing, is it happens all the time.
It does, but I think what I
time.
like about this Dave Chappelle situation is that it brings light to it, at least just a little bit, and hopefully some of these ethical practices can get changed. And, you know, because now we live in a technology world. Like 20 years ago, yes, there was a lot of fact checking and stuff that went on, but it's so much easier to do fact checking now and to legitimize the things that are happening because there are checks and balances, because we can, on a very public forum, shout from the rooftops and say, no. We can do that. Even just a little person. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it had to be one of the higher ups. You had to show and prove your case to one of the higher ups. And now, if you just have a Twitter account, you can get your voice heard. So I think it's great. I think this is interesting. I'm sure there's most definitely going to be more news to follow as the weeks go on. I think we've beat this horse to death. Ladies and gentlemen, what do you think of Dave Chappelle going out and getting his due diligence? As Chris pointed out, I think he makes a great argument. I think this is a good thing. Is there something that we're forgetting, something we're leaving out? What do you think of the situation? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys, one last topic to cover before the show is over and we take your live questions, of which nobody has been sending in any live comments or questions. So if you're watching, go ahead and send in some live comments and questions. Or don't. It doesn't matter. It's fine. I will...
We just covered everything so well, Mike.
So intimately. It's weird that I just said it like that. Intimately.
Yeah, I really wish you wouldn't do that again.
Chris?
Don't do it.
Let's move on to our next topic. And our next topic is, apparently, this is not new news, you guys. This article was posted back in March, I think it was or February? Is that what it is? Yeah, February 28th, the last day of February. Or this was a leap year, wasn't it? Who knows?
It was.
Who cares? Second to last day of February. So here's the thing. The reason why we're talking about this right now is Screen Rant. If you're familiar with Screen Rant on YouTube or even on their website, Screen Rant just posted a video. They have a series of videos called Pitch Meeting. Where one guy kind of plays like two sides of the coin. He plays the person pitching a movie idea to the executive, and then he plays the part of the executive receiving the idea and giving some notes back on this idea. And it's kind of a popular YouTube series that he does for Screen Rant and with Screen Rant. Just talking about like, hey, like every movie always has a really weird angle to it. So if you kind of like look at the macro picture of what any given movie's concept would be about, what would that pitch meeting sound like or look like? Of course, it has a very comedic slant to it. Well, in a very recent video that Screen Rant that this pitch meeting video did, they included or embedded this particular image right over here along in the video, which is an article written by Screen Rant. So because it brings up this concept of, hey, we're not going to remake a movie that everybody loves and whatever. That's not a great idea. Cut to this. I've been very vocal in saying that there are certain properties that just should not be remade or rebooted. Back to the Future primarily being one of these properties. Hey, look, if you can remake something, if you can reboot something, and you have something to say, and it's timely, and it's relevant, and you can improve upon what was already there, Ocean's 11 is the perfect example of this. The original Ocean's 11 is not a good movie. It's actually a bad movie. It's a great concept, but it's not a good movie. Just because it has the Rat Pack in it does not make it a good movie. I get it. All film is subjective. You may like it. You may think it's a good movie. In my opinion and many other people's opinions, the original Ocean's 11, not a good movie. So when they remade it in a very timely way. They had something interesting to say about it. And they added so many more interesting elements to make it a good movie. Not just a good movie, it spawned 3 sequels. That's how fun it was. That's how much people loved it and enjoyed it. I have never thought that that you can do anything from Back to the Future. You can't do a Back to the Future 4 because you need Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox to come back. I don't think that having them come back now would be proper or relevant. I don't think that they can capture the spirit of their original characters. Nor, if they were to reboot the franchise, do I think that there's anything interesting or of value to say about this. So why are we talking about this right now? Well, apparently Tom Holland back in March let loose during an interview that he can confirm to people that there have been talks that have happened from Universal Studios, who owns the rights, who co-own the rights to Back to the Future. The legitimate rights to Back to the Future land with Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, both writers, and Robert Zemeckis, the director of the film. Here, let's jump over to this article in the Hollywood Reporter. Now, this article came out back in 2015, and this is what Robert Zemeckis had to say about it. Let's see. I should have done my homework better. This is all kind of a last minute thing. The Oscar-winning director lamented that after he died, Hollywood this is they're speaking about Robert Zemeckis. Hollywood would probably seek to remake Back to the Future, but to reiterate his opposition, he hoped there would be some way of stopping it. Quote, "And then, when I'm dead, I'm sure they'll do it, unless there's a way our states can stop it." Robert Zemeckis has been very candid in saying he doesn't want a remake or a reboot of Back to the Future. He wants to leave it the way it is. Down here in this particular paragraph, he says the Polar Express director, again, Robert Zemeckis, outlined his reasons for why he was so dead set against a remake, saying, I mean, to me, that's outrageous, especially since it's a good movie. It's like saying, let's remake Citizen Kane. Who are we going to get to play Kane? What folly, what insanity is that? Why would anyone do that? This is the kind of thing that has been debated about for a very long time now. Are they going to do Back to the Future 4? Are they going to remake it? Are they going to reboot the franchise? If they do, who are they going to get to do it? Now, there was a deep fake video that came out that hit the internet, like a year ago? And this was what Tom Holland was referencing when he confirmed that, yes, talks actually have happened over at Universal. I'm sorry, let me clarify. It was a deepfake video of himself, Tom Holland and Robert Downey Jr. in the Marty McFly and Doc Brown roles. You could probably find it online somewhere, and that's what he was responding to. So here are my thoughts. Here's what I have to say about this. There's a few thoughts jumbling around in my brain right now. One, I think that Tom Holland... It's possible that he said what he said, that he is confirming that talks to remake or to reboot Back to the Future have happened. It's possible that he said that just to stir the pot, just to see what happens, which in some ways is actually kind of clever, because if Tom Holland himself, the actor, who, may I remind you, has no authority or command of Hollywood, But if he can plant an idea in people's consciousness and say, I want to play Marty McFly in a remake of Back to the Future. If he tells a little white lie and gets everybody else to believe it, that's actually kind of a clever thing. And now everybody is starting to think of, oh, well, what if we did get, Robert Downey Jr. to play Doc Brown and we get Tom Holland to play Marty McFly? It would be a very, very different kind of movie. But what if? And then maybe slowly you start to get people on board with that. And then just like with the Deadpool leak video that eventually got Deadpool made, something like that could happen if this is Tom Holland's devious plan. So that's option number one. Option number two is that Tom Holland actually was telling the truth. It's possible that he has heard rumors and whispers, to which I'm a little dubious. How would Tom Holland, the actor, hear about some of these behind closed doors conversations? Unless he was a part of those conversations, I'm a little dubious. But let's just go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt and say that, yes, these conversations have happened. That means, again, one of two things. One, Robert Zemeckis it also has to be a part of these conversations because his estate is the ones that own the majority of the rights to Back to the Future. So you need Robert Zemeckis' go-ahead. Without his go-ahead, this whole project is dead in the water. So if Robert Zemeckis is in on some of these conversations, that means that he's either A, entertaining the idea and then, eventually shut it down, or B, he's entertaining the idea and saying, you know what? You came up with something that none of us considered, and maybe, let's hear a little bit more. Now, again, this happened back in February. We haven't heard any new information on this since February. I don't see this happening. Robert Zemeckis has been so explicit throughout the years in just saying that, he does not want to see a Back to the Future remake or reboot. He doesn't see the value in it. To him, is it unfair of the filmmaker himself who created Back to the Future to compare it against Citizen Kane? Maybe that's a little self-indulgent, but he makes a great point in saying that if there is a film out there, if there's a story that the social consciousness has delivered as being kind of a perfect entity, how do you improve upon perfect? Why are you going to do this? Chris, I've laid a whole bunch of arguments out on the table. Do you have anything to add? Do you see any value in doing a Back to the Future remake? Do you think it ever could happen? Do you think it would happen? Where do you stand?
The answers are no, yes, and yes. No, there's no value in it. It's the three movies are the three movies. There are three movies that I hold near and dear to my heart. I love the original Back to the Future. Back to the Future 3 was the first movie I ever saw in a movie theater by myself. Rode my bike to the movie theater, chained it, and went and watched that movie. Yeah, they're great films. They don't need to be remade. Could it be redone? Yeah, both Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale own the rights to it, and Bob Gale has been making a whole bunch of comic books about Back to the Future. So this whole idea that the story is a sacred cow that can't be revisited is pretty null and void. I think that Zemeckis is the one who's holding back a film version being made of these sort of pseudo sequels.
They were both consultants on the video game, or both. There were two video games, I think.
Right, but I think ultimately the reason why the comic book works and what they're saying is that what makes that story work is the relationship of Marty and Doc, and the idea of recasting Marty and Doc, especially with where Michael J. Fox is in his life, feels gross. Do I think it will be remade? Yeah, probably at some point. Here's the thing: it's less that I hold Back to the Future as some sacred entity that can't be touched. It's just more along the lines of, let's get some new ideas. Let's get something new out there. Even though I'm not a huge fan of this film franchise, The Fast and the Furious shows us that the audience is willing to go
Yeah.
on a very long
Yeah.
journey on a new franchise with new characters experiencing a new sort of reality. It just takes bravery from the studio, and it takes talent from writers and actors and the creators. But mostly it just comes from the studio. The studio has to be brave enough. One of the reasons why I think it's exciting that movies are going to start being released on streaming services is that I'm hoping that you're going to see a renaissance of independent filmmaking, because you can get someone like a Kevin Smith, who personally I think his movies have been diminishing in their
They have.
returns for over 20
They
years
have.
now. But you could get like a Kevin Smith to sign an exclusivity deal with the Netflix and just make a bunch of movies on Netflix. And they could be very good. I mean, that could happen. Adam Sandler could make some good Netflix films. Probably not going to. But once again, just get some new ideas. Like if they can come up with an interesting idea for what I will call a sequel to Back to the Future, meaning it would have to be something sans those two characters. It would have to be something that is interesting to the core concept and honors the original core concept. Right. Because if you introduce any characters who are connected to Doc and Marty, I feel like the first thing to jump to is like, oh, maybe it's one of Doc's kids. But the minute that you do that, you've got to explain where Doc is. You've got to explain where Marty is. And those explanations are not going to be super they're not going to be super satisfactory to the audience. But if you did a film in which, I don't know, someone discovers the DeLorean and they don't know who it came from and they're trying to figure it out, that could be interesting. You could do something where it's a Doc and Marty in an alternate reality. I mean, that gets into a Rick and Morty thing. But so there's ways around it to make it an interesting story. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're just rehashing someone else's story. Write your own write a new time travel movie. Time travel is such a great concept.
That right there, that's a great idea. If we were talking about originality and also revisiting an original idea, what you just said of like, hey, somebody somewhere down the line in the future, somebody somehow somewhere discovers like a time machine car. Again, it doesn't have to be a car. You can turn it into whatever it is that you want.
They could discover the flux capacitor.
Discover a flux capacitor, the thing, and again, it doesn't have to be Back to the Future. Call it something completely different. They found a mug, and this particular mug is the key to time travel, don't call it Back to the Future. Call it something completely different. Don't rip off somebody else's IP, or rather play into somebody else's IP. Create something completely different. Yeah, I'm sure there will be audiences that say, hey, this has some Back to the Future overtones, but it gets to be its own thing. It gets to be its own franchise without having to... It's a way around the legal process and still get to satisfy. If you really truly have something that great that could elevate the franchise, why not just make it its own thing?
Well, that and this Tom Holland RJD thing, it's like, look, their relationship is cute in Spider-Man. Sure. It's real snarky, but I at no point got any sort of moment of feeling like these two characters actually have a deep affection for one another. Whereas I feel like in Back to the Future, it's what's really interesting about Back to the Future versus, let's just look at the core relationship of Marty and Doc versus Peter Parker and Tony Stark. And this goes to the writing. They tell us a lot that Peter Parker and Tony Stark have affection for each other, but they don't really show us that often. In fact, what they actually show us is that they're pretty snippy with each other and they're pretty snarky with each other. But Doc and Marty are shown to have affection for each other. They don't tell us they have affection. They're shown to have affection for each other. And it's shown through their actions, and it's shown through the adventure that they share together. Doc is not a a Deus Machina. I can't say
Deus
the
Ex
word.
Machina.
Yeah. He is not a Deus Ex Machina for Marty. He is as invested in the journey as Marty is. Whereas the relationship between Stark and Peter in Spider-Man, it feels very much like Marvel kind of. I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings about the Far From Home universe because I just wish that it didn't depend so much on Tony Stark.
That's fair.
It doesn't need Tony Stark. Spider-Man's a strong enough character to not have to be built off the back of that character. And in many ways, he's a stronger character than Iron Man. But yeah, it's just like the relationships are not the same. And I get that people are like, oh, that'd be really cute if they did that for Back to the Future. But I don't really want to see RJD crack wise as Doc Brown. Doc Brown isn't a self-aware smartass. He is a crazy person.
Well, it's the same argument that was had about Chris Pratt playing Indiana Jones. When that was a fan internet rumor that spread, and everyone's like, oh, even I got a little excited by it because I'm like, you know what, I could see Chris Pratt playing Indiana Jones.
I hear you on that, but I'm going to push back to you on this thing and say this. The reason I would buy that more is because there is no Indiana Jones character. Indiana Jones is Harrison Ford. Like, there is no inherent like Indiana Jones character. It's just Harrison Ford. It's the same reason why casting the kid, I can't think of the guy's name in Solo, is sort of ridiculous because there is no Han Solo.
It's just Harrison Ford
in a science fiction movie going, I don't know. And so
I think a counter argument to that would be Sean Connery and James Bond. But then, we have, the larger than life aspect of who James Bond does get to be inhabited by. I'm just playing devil's advocate is what I'm doing.
But what I'm saying is that you actually make the point by saying Sean Connery and James Bond because there was no James Bond character. It was just Sean Connery. And so one of the reasons why they're so particular about who they cast as James Bond is because they understand that the actor has to truly just be that James Bond becomes an extension of the actor. So what I'm saying is like, I actually could buy Indiana Jones being portrayed by different actors because there is no inherent Indiana Jones character. It's just Indiana Jones in these series of adventures. And so if you bring Chris Pratt to it and he's just like super duper Chris Pratt, then yeah, because I remember in the 90s, like old school internet rumor, there was a rumor for a period of time that I was really excited for that they were going to start remaking Indiana Jones movies with David Duchovny as Indiana Jones.
This sounds oddly familiar. Wasn't it going to be like a television series? Because there was the young Indiana Jones. Wasn't there? They were going to do like David Duchovny as like an older Indiana Jones series or something?
No, they were just going to do
films.
a new Indiana Jones movie with David Duchovny. And I remember, I think it was supposed to be like, I think Atlantis was going to be the big thing he was looking for. And I remember it being sort of like a big deal. And then I think it was the Don Bluth company. Maybe it was Disney. Some company came out with an Atlantis movie, animated film, and it sunk at the box office. It just like made no money. And that scared Lucasfilm off of going forward with the film. Because they said, oh, well, people don't like Atlantis, which is like the most ridiculous thing ever. But yeah, I mean, I'm more inclined to watch a different person be Indiana Jones because those films are not dependent upon the character of Indiana Jones to be enjoyable on some level. Indiana Jones is just a surrogate for the audience, whereas the Back to the Future films, the characters are so succinctly drawn to who they are, and the adventure in the films of Back to the Future are so specific to those characters' actions within
what you're talking
films.
about is chemistry between actors. Like the chemistry is Back to the Future is Marty McFly and Doc Brown, but it is the relationship. That's why they had to get rid of Eric Stoltz, because he didn't have that chemistry. And then when they recast with Michael J. Fox 6 weeks into production and had to refilm almost everything, that's what made it work.
Right. Because you have to understand that in this film, so what's interesting, like I could talk all day about this, Mike.
I feel
What's
like we
interesting
are.
when you hey, no one's watching. We
That's
can live our
fair.
lives. When you take a look at Indiana Jones, right? The events of Indiana Jones are going to happen regardless of whether or not Indiana Jones is there or not. And I know that there's like this popular internet meme that says Indiana Jones doesn't really do anything in the film, nor does he change. And that's not necessarily true. But what I'm saying is that the events in motion, the inciting incident of Indiana Jones has nothing to do with Indiana Jones. He is a person going on the
Yeah.
adventure. The inciting incident of Back to the Future is integrally tied to Marty and Doc. It is through their actions that the film starts. It is through their inaction that the film starts to take shape. It is through their own foibles, their own wants and desires, that the film is the engine of the movie. That's the reason why it's such a good film, because the movie just happens to be a time travel movie. It just happens to be that. They use the convention of time travel for Bob Gale to answer a question that he had as a kid, which was, would I have been friends with my dad in high school? And that's how he came up. I'm not sure if you know how he came up with the story, but the story is Bob Gale was like looking through an old yearbook of his father, and he found out that his father was like the president of the student body, and Bob Gale was sort of like a pot smoking hippie. And he looked at his dad and he was like, what a dork. Would I have even liked my dad in high school? And that was the thing that stuck in his head, and about like what would happen if a son met his father in high school. And then to answer the question of how that would happen, he said, well, time travel would have to be involved. And so all the sort of science fiction elements are just there to answer the question of how to tell the story. And that's why I think those characters are so integral to those stories themselves.
I agree. I am in complete agreement with you. I love that analysis.
You're welcome.
Man, I feel like I have a sneeze coming on and it just won't completely manifest itself. But yeah, I could not agree more. I think that Back to the Future is one of those properties that if somebody comes up with a really, really great idea, sure, I'd be interested in seeing it. I just don't see a remake or a reboot happening anytime soon. You know, Back to the Future is in the social consciousness right now so hard, and people love this movie so hard that the pushback, you would have to have some like a really, really incredible concept or story or hook to do it. I don't see it happening anytime soon. Could it ever happen? I mean, yeah, it could sometime down the road happen. But you know, I'm inclined to agree with Bob Zemeckis right now and just saying I don't think it's a good idea. I agree with you, Chris. Let's find some new ground to cover. Let's find a new angle. Let's do something different. Let's have some fun with it.
I'd be far more interested if they took like the Back to the Future core concept and they gave it to Tina Fey to rewrite, and they cast Leslie Jones to be the star.
Ooh.
That to me would be like, oh, that's interesting.
That would be very interesting. Something completely different. Completely different.
Just the core concept of someone going back and meeting their family. Yeah. That's interesting. Just give it to a completely different writer who has a different sensibility, and give it to a strong actor who has a completely different worldview from Michael J. Fox, and then see what happens. That's interesting. It may fall flat on its face, but I don't need to see Tom Holland do a terrible Michael J. Fox. But again,
this goes back to my original point of saying that, like, I don't want something to be done just because they can do it. Like, what new things? How are you elevating the material? I only want to see this done if you can elevate the material. If it's going to be subpar, if it's going to be like like Footloose. When they remade the movie Footloose, why?
Well, that's the reason why. That's the reason why I think the first Brendan Fraser Mummy works, is because it's basically just Indiana Jones but goofy. They said, let's make Indiana Jones, but let's try to make it as goofy as possible. And it
elevated the material. It worked for the 90s. In the 90s, that's what was playing to their audience. They knew what they had, And they elevated the material. They created not a completely new mythos, but a new structure on how to play in this world that was relevant at the time. I'm all for it.
And then they made the Scorpion King.
I don't know what that movie is. Ladies and gentlemen, big question for you guys is, what do you think of a possible reboot remake of Back to the Future? Are you on board with this idea? Do you agree with Chris and myself in saying that if you're going to do it, you have to elevate the material? Is it too soon? Is it still going to be too soon 30 years from now? If you had a DeLorean, what time period would you go to, and would you talk to yourself and possibly uproot the whole time quantum mechanics? Jump down to the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys, normally this is the part of the show where we take your live questions, but guess what? We have no live questions. So, this is on par for the day. Hey, Thanksgiving is tomorrow. I feel like we can give some people a little break. Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you so much. I love talking to you and hearing your thoughts, because you think so deep and hard about some of these things and you bring a perspective of something that I hadn't stopped to consider before. Specifically with Dave Chappelle, you supplemented a lot of my ideas about Back to the Future with other perspectives, again, that I hadn't taken into consideration. And the depth and the level of gravitas that we brought to Clifford, the big red dog, I will never stop to be amazed by. So, sir, thank you so much for being on the show. If you do me a favor, tell our viewers where they can find you online and what projects you have coming up.
I am at the Chris Booth. That's where you can find me on all social media, at the Chris Booth. In terms of projects coming up, I am still in the tail end of writing a book. I can't believe that I'm doing that, but I'm still doing it. So who knows what that will come of it, if anything. And that's about it for now. I also appear on a character team called AP Calculus, and in a short form improv group called The Game Nights. And we are taking a bit of a holiday hiatus starting mid-December, but we'll be back at the beginning of February.
Chris, thank you so much. You're such a beautiful human being. And
right back
I'm curious,
to you.
how many of those books on the bookshelf behind you have you actually read? I'm glad to hear it.
Every single one of them.
Hey,
I have a question for you, Mike, before we end. Do you mind telling me about your graphics? Who made your graphics?
Yeah, that's a great point. So our graphics were created by Mr. Josh Hollifield. If anybody's been watching the show, you know that my other day job, I work as a flight attendant. So Josh Hollifield and we've been working as flight attendants together. We were in the same training class. And we have literally flown around the world together and just gone off on weird, wacky adventures. Josh has been he's been an illustrator for a very long time. And every now and again, he gets graphics work to do, and so I hired him to create all the graphics here. You can see right down there. There's little me, and then the Gotta Love the Movies and everything else. He's an extremely talented human being. His Twitter, if you want to go follow him on Twitter, it's Captain Garfield. I know he's having some struggles, a little hardships in his family, in his life right now. World events related. I think that's probably as in depth as we probably want to go into right now. But if anybody wants to drop him a line, his all of his information is in the description below. So check him out there. I know he definitely appreciated it, and a huge hug and all the thoughts in the world to him and his family at this time.
And much like you, Mike, Josh is an extremely nice human being. And so, a lot of love to you, Josh.
They need it right now. So with as insensitive as not, you know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to make a segue here. You guys, if you like the show, if you like this video, click like. If you really like the video, click subscribe. And if you really, really like this video, click share, because that is exactly what let's go with Clifford the Big Red Dog. That's exactly what Clifford the Big Red Dog would want you to do. Huge thanks to everybody who was watching. Thanks to everybody who comments. And you guys, we live in a weird, crazy world where everybody has their own thoughts and opinions, and sometimes those thoughts and opinions clash. So if you have an opportunity to infuse a little bit of kindness into the world today, if you have an opportunity to speak kind words to each other, please take those opportunities. As always, in the words of Bill and Ted, be excellent to each other. I'll see you guys tomorrow.